Good morning, class. This video is for class 8 students, chemistry subject, chapter number 3, elements, compounds and mixture. This is the second part of the chapter in which we are going to study about the separation of mixtures, different methods for separation of mixtures. A mixture is separated for the following purposes. What is the purpose behind separating a mixture? First one is to remove a harmful or undesirable component. There are several harmful and undesirable components also present in the mixture which needs to be removed. For example, the undesirable substances such as oils, sand, clay, salt and microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi and algae are often present in the water. The water that we intake have several types of undesirable substances like these, which needs to be separated, which needs to be removed before it is supplied to our homes. So these are removed from the water before supplying it to our homes. So this is the purpose behind separation. Second point is to obtain a useful substance. There are several useful substances also present in the mixture which needs to be obtained. For example, petroleum oil is a mixture of useful substances such as petrol, diesel and kerosene. We know that petroleum oil have all these different components which are useful. So these needs to be separated and are used as fuels. To obtain the pure sample of a substance, so separation is also important to obtain pure samples of a substance. For example, many substances are required in their pure form for scientific research and making medicines. So there are some substances which are required for the scientific research purpose. So to obtain these substances in their pure form, there is the need to separate the mixture. Now, what is the principle of separation? You know that the constituents of a mixture have their own properties. This we already have learnt in the previous video. This difference in their properties forms the principle for separating them from each other. So the basic principle is the difference in the properties of the constituents. The constituents which are present in a mixture, all of them have different properties, and that is the basic concept behind separating them from each other. Different methods of separation are used to get the individual constituents from a mixture. So all the different constituents are separated by different methods. The choice of method for separating the constituents of a mixture depends on the nature of the mixture and the properties of the constituents in it. So the method that we choose for the separation of mixture depends on nature of mixture and the properties of the constituents in it. मिक्सचर की जो प्रॉपर्टी, मिक्सचर का नेचर कैसा है और उसके जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स जिससे वो बना है उनकी प्रॉपर्टीज़ क्या है, इसके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है कि हम कौन सा मेथड चूज़ करते हैं फॉर द सेपरेशन प्रोसेस. सम कॉमनली यूज मेथड्स फॉर सेपरेटिंग द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स ऑफ अ मिक्सचर आर डिस्क्राइब्ड हियर. So there are several methods. Few of them have been described in your book which you have to learn. Now the first one is separation of solid-solid mixture. As we already learnt in the previous video that there are several states of constituents like solid-solid mixture, solid-liquid mixture, liquid-liquid mixture, liquid-gas mixture or gas-gas mixture, solid-gas mixture. All these types of mixtures have different methods for their separation. So we already know about some common methods of separation of the components of solid-solid mixture. They are hand picking, sieving, winnowing and magnetic separation. So you see in this diagram, this is the hand picking method. You must have seen this very commonly in your homes also. What is this mixture? What is this method? Example, you can see hand picking of stones from rice. Okay. This next one is sieving. You see, you must have seen this also. While building of roads or etc., the sand particles are sieved so that stone or sand particles alag ho सकें. The next one is winnowing. What is winnowing? विंड के फ्लो के डायरेक्शन में जब हम वीट ग्रेन्स को ऐसे विनो करते हैं, मतलब ऐसे छानते हैं, तो क्या होता है कि जो शार्प पार्टिकल्स है, दैट इज़ जो अनवांटेड पार्टिकल्स है व्हीट ग्रेन के अंदर, वो सेपरेट आउट हो जाता है और व्हीट ग्रेन्स हमें क्लीन व्हीट ग्रेन्स ऑब्टेन होते हैं. द नेक्स्ट वन इज़ द मैग्नेटिक सेपरेशन. यू सी, मैग्नेटिक सेपरेशन किसके सेपरेशन के लिए यूज़फुल होगा? फॉर द सेपरेशन ऑफ आयरन. जो भी वेस्ट मटेरियल्स हैं उनके अंदर आयरन कंटेंट अगर कहीं है तो उसको हम सेपरेट करते हैं थ्रू द इलेक्ट्रोमैग्नेटिक मेथड. ओके, so these were few methods, with very common methods, but there are some other methods also which you have to study. The first one is sublimation. The change of a solid directly into its vapor state without passing through the liquid state is called sublimation. This is the definition of sublimation. And what does it means? It means when a solid, we all know that what happens, solid changes into liquid, liquid changes into gas, but in this sublimation process, what happens? Solid directly changes into its vapor form or its gaseous form without being changed into the liquid. मतलब यहाँ liquid का कोई involvement नहीं है, directly solid जो है वो vapor form में change हो रहा है. And what is the principle behind this process? The sublimation process is used to separate a mixture containing a constituent that sublimes. मतलब जो भी दो solids use हो रहे हैं मिक्सचर के अंदर, उनमें से किसी एक ना एक के पास सबलाइम होने की प्रॉपर्टी होनी चाहिए. दैट मीन्स अगर एक सॉलिड, दो सॉलिड्स हैं मिक्सचर के अंदर, तो एक को सब्लिमेशन प्रोसेस होना, उसके अंदर प्रॉपर्टी होनी चाहिए फॉर द प्रोसेस ऑफ सब्लिमेशन. नाउ व्हाट इज़ द टेक्निक ऑफ सेपरेशन? On heating the mixture, the solid undergoes sublimation and changes into its vapor. The vapor is then cooled to get the solid back. What happens when the mixture of solid mixture is heated? One of the solid undergoes sublimation and it changes into its vapor. Suppose these are two solids in a mixture, 1 and 2. Suppose solid number 2 has the property to sublime or can do sublimation, so it changes into its vapor form. Then what happens? The vapor is then cooled to get the solid back. This vapor is then cooled and again we get solid number 2. So that is how the solid in the mixture that does not undergo sublimation remains behind in the evaporating dish. Now the examples of sublimation are, there are different substances which shows sublimation process like ammonium chloride, iodine, camphor, dry ice, naphthalene, anthracene and benzoic acid. Now, separation of solid liquid mixture. What do we understand by solid liquid mixture? One is solid and the other is liquid. In solid liquid mixture, when the solid is insoluble, then the liquid the mixture can be separated by following methods. When solid is insoluble, that means solid is not dissolved in the liquid completely. Solid particles हमें naked eye से दिख रहे हैं. Then we use these following methods like sedimentation and decantation. What happens in this? The settling down of the insoluble heavy solid particles in a solid liquid mixture of a bottom of a container is called sedimentation. What happens in sedimentation? जब solid liquid particles हैं तो उसमें जो heavy solid particles हैं, that is solid one, वो कंटेनर के बॉटम में सेटल डाउन हो जाता है and this is called the sedimentation process. The solid particles that settle down in a layer at the bottom of the container is called the sediment. Sediment क्या होता है? वो solid particle जो अपने heavy weight की वजह से कंटेनर के बॉटम में सेटल हो जाता है is called sediment, and the clear liquid above the sediment is called the supernatant liquid. What is supernatant? जो clear liquid ऊपर रह जाता है उसको supernatant liquid कहते हैं. You see in this figure 3.13, in this is the muddy water. Okay, इसके अंदर soil particles है और liquid है, that is water. After some time when it is left ideally, what happens? These solid particles or the mud, ये नीचे sediment के फॉर्म में कलेक्ट हो जाता है और ऊपर क्लियर वाटर, क्लियर लिक्विड सुपरनेटेंट होता है. तो दिस वाज सेडिमेंट एंड दिस इज द सुपरनेटेंट. नाउ व्हाट इज द प्रिंसिपल बिहाइंड सेडिमेंटेशन? In a solid liquid mixture, the insoluble heavy solid particles settle down at the bottom of the container due to gravity. What is the principle? Principle is gravity. That means solid, हमेशा solid जो है वो heavier होगा liquid से. तो solid जो है अपनी heaviness की वजह से जो है वो नीचे settle down हो जाता है because of the gravity. Gravity pulls anything towards itself. So what happens? सॉलिड पार्टिकल्स सेटल डाउन हो जाते हैं और सेडिमेंट हो जाते हैं. नाउ व्हाट इज द टेक्निक ऑफ सेपरेशन? द मिक्सचर इज अलाउड टू स्टैंड अनडिस्टर्ब्ड टिल द हैवी सॉलिड पार्टिकल्स सेटल डाउन. व्हाट हैपन्स? मिक्सचर को एज इट इज स्टैंड अनडिस्टर्ब छोड़ देते हैं ताकि सॉलिड पार्टिकल्स जो है वो सेटल डाउन हो जाए. Then the clear liquid at the top is transferred into another container without disturbing the solid sediment. You see in this diagram, when this mud or this solid particle is collected in the bottom of the container, तो क्या होता है, इसको डिस्टर्ब किए बिना जो क्लियर लिक्विड पार्ट है उसको हम दूसरे बीकर में ट्रांसफ़र करते हैं. एंड दिस प्रोसेस इज नोन एज डिकैंटेशन. So the process of pouring the clear supernatant liquid without disturbing the sediment is called decantation. This facilitates the separation of solid particles from the liquid. So what are the examples? Sand in water, that is sand forms the sediment. Muddy water, mud forms the sediment. Okay. The next method is filtration. What happens in filtration? The process of separating the fine insoluble solid particles from a solid liquid mixture through a filter is called filtration. What was the principle? What was the sedimentation? Sedimentation में जो insoluble heavy particles थे उनका separation हो रहा था, लेकिन filtration में fine insoluble solid particles का होता है जिनको हम naked eye से शायद ना देख पाएँ, वो solid particles का filtration होता है. The principle behind this process is used for separating the constituents of a heterogeneous solid liquid mixture in which the solid particles are lighter and insoluble in the liquid. What happens? इसमें इस प्रोसेस का जो मेन प्रिंसिपल है वो ये है कि जो भी सेपरेटिंग कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स हैं उस हेट्रोजीनियस सॉलिड लिक्विड मिक्सचर में, हेट्रोजीनियस मीन्स द मिक्सचर इज नॉट यूनिफॉर्मली डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड, तो उसमें क्या होता है, solid particles are lighter and insoluble in the liquid. Okay. Now the technique of separation. The mixture is allowed to pass through a filter with pores that allow the liquid to pass through but not solid particles. इसमें टेक्निक क्या है, जो भी मिक्सचर है सॉलिड और लिक्विड का उसको हम एक फ़िल्टर पेपर या एक फ़िल्टर के थ्रू पास करवाते हैं और वो फ़िल्टर में बहुत सारे छोटे छोटे पोर्स होते हैं एंड दैट पोर अलाउ द लिक्विड टू पास थ्रू इट. लिक्विड को पास करने के लिए वो छोड़ देता है लेकिन सॉलिड पार्टिकल्स ऊपर रह जाते हैं. द सॉलिड लेफ्ट ऑन द फिल्टर इज कॉल्ड द रेसिड्यू एंड द क्लियर लिक्विड दैट पासिस थ्रू द फिल्टर इज कॉल्ड द फिल्ट्रेट. यहाँ पर जो सॉलिड पार्टिकल्स फिल्टर के ऊपर रह गए दोज आर कॉल्ड रेसिड्यू, और जो क्लियर लिक्विड दैट पासिस थ्रू द फिल्टर इज नोन एज फिल्ट्रेट. व्हाट आर द एग्जाम्पल्स? चॉक पाउडर एंड वाटर. अगर आप एक फ़िल्टर पेपर के थ्रू चॉक पाउडर और वाटर को पास करो तो चॉक पाउडर जो है वो फ़िल्टर पेपर के ऊपर रह जाएगा और वाटर जो है वो फ़िल्टर पेपर के थ्रू पास हो जाएगा. सिमिलरली क्ले एंड वाटर, सॉ डस्ट एंड वाटर, टी एंड टी लीव्स आर सेपरेटेड बाय फिल्ट्रेशन. In a solid liquid mixture, when solid is soluble in the liquid, the following methods are used. अब जब solid पूरी तरीके से soluble है liquid में तब कौन कौन से methods यूज़ होते हैं? First one is evaporation. Evaporation is the process of changing a liquid into its vapor state. It is the process of changing liquid into its vapor state. When liquid is changed into its vapor state, or you can say gaseous state. So this is known as evaporation. Evaporation can be made faster by heating the mixture. Normally evaporation होता है but fast हो जाएगा जब उसमें heating involve हो जाएगी. What is the principle behind evaporation? The liquid constituents of the mixture evaporates leaving behind the solid constituents. So liquid constituents हमेशा evaporate हो जाता है यानी उड़ जाता है and leaving behind the solid constituents. What is the technique of separation? The liquid constituents of the mixture is allowed to separate by exposing it to air, sunlight or by heating. What happens? जो भी लिक्विड कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स है मिक्सचर का वो इवेपोरेट हो जाता है जब भी हम उसको लाइट में या एयर में या हीटिंग करते हैं उसकी, तो लिक्विड इवेपोरेट्स. ड्यूरिंग दिस प्रोसेस द लिक्विड इज लॉस्ट टू द एटमॉस्फेयर एंड सॉलिड इज लेफ्ट बिहाइंड. What are the examples? The process of evaporation is used on a large scale to obtain common salt from seawater. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा इसको लार्ज स्केल में हम तब यूज़ करते हैं जब हमें सी वाटर से सॉल्ट का एक्सट्रैक्शन करना होता है. वी ऑल नो दैट सी वाटर कंटेन्स सम सॉल्ट. तो सॉल्ट को हम नेचुरली उससे कैसे लेंगे? जब हम सी वाटर को इवेपोरेट करवाएंगे तो सारा वाटर जो है वो इवेपोरेट हो जाएगा एंड व्हाट वी विल लेफ्ट विद द कॉमन सॉल्ट. What is done? Seawater is trapped in shallow ponds and is allowed to evaporate in the sun and the common salt is left behind. सी वाटर को हम एक पॉन्ड में पूरी भर देते हैं तो जो इवेपोरेट हो जाता है, जो वाटर है वो इवेपोरेट हो जाता है और कॉमन सॉल्ट इज लेफ्ट बिहाइंड. So that is all for this video. The next topic, that is the crystallization technique, that we will be discussing in the next video. So you go through this video and ask me if you have any doubts. That is all for this video. Thank you.